I'm going to focus more on the sections, what you need to do after you have your LLC set up. Okay. All right. Okay, so here we go. So the LLC. So owners are typically not liable for business debt. So that's the whole one of the big advantages, right? Also, for the LLC, there's flexibility in the management structure. So you can use any legal structure that's agreed upon by you, and if you have other, husband and wife, or just a team of people that come together that want to wholesale or things like that. When you do your taxes for a single member LLC, meaning it's just one person that owns the LLC, then you'll do your taxes. That section of your taxes under the LLC name, but it actually will just function as a pass-through, and you'll pay taxes at your individual normal tax rate. So if your individual normal tax rate is 28%, 35%, that is what you'll pay. Okay, now one of the things that I want to stress is the LLC is regulated by the state level, right? And so for your LLC to be in active good standing, there's an annual fee that you need to pay every year. And it's not much. It's usually like $25, $35, something like that. But you have to pay it every single year for your LLC to be active. If you do not pay it and you put a property under contract, a lot of times what happens is, because you didn't pay it, the LLC will go into an inactive status. When you're in inactive status, the LLC is not allowed to do business in the state. And so what happens is, if your LLC is inactive, when you go to settlement and the settlement company pulls for the LLC documents and it shows inactive, they will not complete the transaction because they're not supposed to do business with an inactive LLC. So there have been times where I have purchased property from someone where the property is held in an LLC, and they're having whatever issues, financial issues or whatever, and they did not pay it. I usually have to front that money and pay to get the LLC active so we can close, because that usually will hold up your closing. So it's very important after you have your LLC set up that you make sure you pay that annual fee, because otherwise your LLC is inactive, and when it's inactive, you are not legally supposed to be doing business. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I'm stressing the things that you need to do after your LLC is set up, because a lot of people, they set the LLC up and then it's a wrap. They never do anything again with that LLC, and people don't realize, if you don't keep it active, you're not even supposed to be using that LLC to do business. Okay, so that's what I want to do is, so you have to obey the forms. Okay, number one, you have to enter into contracts as the entity. What that means is, like what I was saying, is if your LLC is ABC Homes, when you get contracts, it needs to be that ABC Homes is the buyer, is what needs to be on there. You have to open a bank account for the entity. So meaning, when you get ready to go to closing, this is another one. You need to have a bank account that is ABC Homes, and the settlement company is going to ask you for that, because if you tell them to wire the funds to, Tanisha King or something, they're not going to do it, because the funds need to go to ABC Homes LLC. So you need to be able to give them a copy of like a voided check, or you need to give them a checking account for that LLC, because otherwise as well, settlement companies are audited as well. So they're not going to break the rules to get you your funds. So you have to make sure, like I said, one, your LLC is active. Two, you must have a separate bank account for your business. Okay. The other one is you can't commingle funds. What that means is you cannot have the LLC funds in your personal bank account. You can't have them just together and commingled, because if you get audited, and I have been audited, if you're audited, that's one of the first things they're going to look for, is if you've been commingling funds. And what will happen, like I said in the beginning, is for legal reasons and for tax reasons, if they see that you and your LLC, you just go back and forth, sometimes you use your name, sometimes you use the LLC name, sometimes the funds are in your personal account, sometimes they're in your bank account, you lose the protection of your LLC, because they'll say, oh, this is not a separate entity. These two, the LLC and you guys just function as one. And so for tax reasons as well, then you would lose, whatever shelter and things you were getting from operating under the LLC. So you don't want that. So you don't want to have, if you have funds in your personal account or bank account, you need to do business, just transfer it and make sure that it's coming out of your bank account. And like I said, when you get deals, the check will need to be made out to the LLC, because the settlement company, if you use ABC Homes LLC on the contract, that is the only person that they're going to send the funds to. They're not going to send funds to your personal account. And the next bullet is where I'm saying you can't use the entity as your alter ego. And that's where we're saying if they just look and see that sometimes you use your name, sometimes you use the LLC name, that is what they mean when they say, oh, this is just an alter ego, but this is, the entities are really the same person. You don't want that. The other thing is you have to update your LLC documents. They have to stay updated. So that's one of the things too I'm going to be sending you all, are your documents and things that you need to be doing. Like for instance, for LLCs, you need to have quarterly minutes, right? So sometimes people are like, well, it's just me in the LLC. And I'm like, well, still just draft your meeting minutes and say, these are the things that I did this month. Came up with marketing strategies, went out meeting with agents, something that you just put, and I have a draft of what the meeting minutes, can look like. You just fill it out, date it, sign, that's it. Because if you, like I said, if you ever get audited or you have any type of legal things, if you don't have that, what happens is they say, you open this LLC, but the LLC has not even been operating. LLC hasn't been doing anything. So I've had and seen people get audited, or they have some type of issue that comes up in their contract. And what they end up having to do is they end up like in 1 or 2 days having to draft minutes for like the past 2 or 3 years so that they can have something. So you don't want to be in that situation. So I always say, just do your meeting minutes every quarter and keep your entity in good standing and not have those issues. And this is where I was saying that your LLC is like governed or kind of legislated by the state. So the requirements are going to be for the state. So this is for like here, Maryland, DC, Virginia. But if you're in another state, look up, you'll know, because would have sent you the documents when you registered. But yeah, it's going to be, if you're in, West Virginia, if you're in California or whatever, you pay California your annual dues and things like that to stay active. So it's always at the state level. The other thing is, if you have an LLC, like say you started your LLC in California, right? And then somebody, calls you or something, or somehow you're doing a virtual deal and that deal is like in Virginia. The correct thing to do is that you have to register you would have to register your LLC in Virginia as a foreign corporation in Virginia. So when you form your LLC in California, that's giving you permission to legally do business in California. So if you go out of California and do business, you need to file, it's called a, you need to register as a foreign corporation in the other state to do that deal. And you have to be very careful with that, because I have seen people get in trouble for that, where they go to do a deal. Sometimes people are mad that they lost out on the deal and they report them, and then they get a letter from that corporation. I had one of my friends, that happened to her. She's here in Virginia, and she did a deal. The property was in Chicago, in Illinois, and somebody, because they were competing for the deal, at least that's what we think happened. They reported her, because I don't, reported her and said that she was doing business in Illinois and she's not legally allowed to do business in Illinois. And so she got a letter, and that she was potentially about to be fined for that, for doing business, because she couldn't produce documents that she could legally do business there. So then she had to get a lawyer and this whole mess. That's why I say, make sure that you do the things you're supposed to do after you form your LLC, because people just get into trouble when they don't. The next thing is called piercing the corporate veil, and this is what happens. Like I mentioned, if you don't obey the laws, if you don't do like what I've been stressing you need to do, then you lose the shelter of not having full liability under your LLC. So then what happens is, if they're able to say, yes, you have been commingling funds. Yes, sometimes you put your name on the contract. Sometimes you put your LLC on the contract. Then they can come after your personal assets, because it's called piercing the corporate veil. They'll say, oh, this LLC is not really a separate entity, and so they'll come after your personal assets. And you don't want that. You always want your entity and you to be separate. Okay, so that's why I'm stressing in this master class that you must make sure you follow the requirements and keep your LLC in good standing after you set it up, because you don't want to set it up and then you're doing all these things incorrectly, and then you lose the protection of the LLC anyway. Okay. I've already gone over this. Do not commingle funds. And of course, if you literally do something illegal, or if you do fraud, then you're not going to be protected because you did it within the LLC. So, but I think that's a given, that people know if you do something illegal, you can't say, oh, I'm not personally liable because I did it under an LLC name. That doesn't work either. Okay, so I want to stress, these are some of the articles that you need once you're incorporated and have your LLC. You need to have articles of incorporation. You need to then file and have an EIN number. So it's kind of like a social security number for business. So you should have that. You need that number. And when you do your taxes, you're going to need that EIN number. And it comes up, that EIN number comes up for different things. Once you form your LLC, you just submit for the IRS to get an EIN number for your business. So like I said, an EIN is like a social security number for businesses. So everybody will have a unique EIN number. Then you'll have your operating agreement or bylaws. Now, your operating agreement, a lot of times, like say sometimes people set up the LLC, they may not have operating agreements, but you need operating agreements and bylaws, because if you don't, if something happens for your LLC, or if you go and, like for instance, a lot of times when you buy a property, so you find a deal and it's a short sale. Short sales need to be approved by the bank. The bank will ask for a copy of the operating agreements for that LLC. They'll ask for a copy of the articles of organization. So what that means, kind of, they're looking at this is really an LLC that functions. So you must have an operating agreement. Also, your operating agreement will have how you function, right? So sometimes it's hard to get one for real estate investors because there are things in there that we do as investors that are different. A lot of times, if you go online, you can buy an operating agreement for real estate, but it will be more like on for a realtor. So there's one that I have that it's one of the documents that I'll send to you all. And this document, I actually spent over $1,000 for this operating agreement. So this is way beyond, what you would have to pay, being one of my students. But I share it with my students because most people, once they form, even a lot of people that use LegalZoom, because I use LegalZoom to set up my LLC, the LegalZoom will give you like a default operating agreement and bylaws, but the one they give you is so generic that it's not as, it's not really, it doesn't cover everything that you need being a wholesaler. So this one, it was actually designed for people that are real estate investors, the one that I'm going to email to you all. And so a lot of your operating agreement has things for like, like for instance, you can write off education, right? So if you took like for this class, for your mentoring, you can include that on your taxes. In the operating agreement that I'm going to send you, it lists that. It lists that under this LLC, you're required to do training. And so that's what, say you were audited or something, that's what makes it so that you can, okay, you were required to take training, you can write it off. So things like that are very important to have in your operating agreement. And then of course your corporate resolutions, and like I said, make sure you pay your annual fees. If you don't pay that annual fee, your LLC automatically goes inactive. And if it's not active, legally, you're not supposed to be doing business. And other businesses, if they realize that your LLC is inactive, they will not do business with you either, because they can also get in trouble for doing business with an LLC that's not legally allowed to do business. Okay, so like I said, if you do that, it's not active, you get ready to go to closing, the settlement company is going to say, oh, we can't close because the LLC is inactive, and you don't want that. And like I said, it's usually not even that much. It's usually like $25, $35, $50 the most, probably. I think I've seen them in each state. So they're really low cost, but a lot of times what happens is people just forget and they don't do it, and their LLC goes inactive. One of the questions a lot of times that we get is people are like, as they start to get like rentals and things like that, they're like, well, if my LLC is offering protection, should I have, like, sometimes people have multiple businesses or something, or multiple rentals, and they're like, is it okay for me to have all this under the same LLC? Usually people will say, well, only put like one property each in an LLC or something like that. But of course, as you grow and grow, that could get kind of crazy. If you have, 20, 30 properties, you got 20, 30 LLCs to manage. So just be mindful of that too, that not to, put too much under the same LLC is what I would advise. All right. You guys take care and have a great day.